This
I'm gonna have to
computer.
click the thing.
Woo! Well, welcome to another death chat. This will be our fifth one.
I think it's the 6th.
Or sixth. Oh, this is the sixth one in like maybe going on 3 years. I'm Jeff Harry, Rediscover Your Play, helping people to address toxicity through play. And who else do we have hanging out with us?
I am Lauren Yee. I am a cultivator of curiosity, and I like to learn and connect through play and curiosity. So I'm here for it.
Beautiful. I'm Julia DeCaneva, and I have a sort of ever morphing idea of what it is that I do for work, but I'm currently exploring the realm of becoming a death doula, even though I was just a life coach. So do with that what you will.
It's both life and death.
Yes.
So I think the first question that we want to explore is, so we haven't talked since apparently, what is it, July of last year? July of last year, and now we're going on like 8-9 months. So what in the realm of death have you either experienced or it's been brought to your attention since we last connected?
Big topic.
It is. Also, time is confusing.
Time is relative, right?
It's a construct. If you're too good at being a human, it makes it hard to follow time.
That's fair.
Mm.
Well, I can go. Not only do I have a friend now that is currently struggling with her closest friend about the potential that she might die, right? That came up. But I've also been talking with somebody about how we embrace fear. We're trying to put together a workshop around embracing fear. And the way we kind of understood how we can embrace fear is through this idea of you're scared to do things because you feel alone, right? And that comes all the way down to death, where you're like, well, I don't want to die alone, right? But when you think of it, kind of like Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter, if you think of it, you can actually cultivate the memories of and think about your ancestors and everyone else that has passed before you, as well as everyone that you're affecting, not even just biologically, but any descendants or anyone that you connect with. And when you think of it that way, then it's just like, oh, if we embrace, instead of the me, we embrace the we can actually navigate things like death in an easier way, because then it doesn't feel as if it's over, you know? It's kind of like, I like when people say, was it not that someone died, but someone moved on or moved on to the next thing. That feels more collective and less individual. So that's what I've been going through.
I mean, I have so many thoughts per usual, but I will say, when you're saying that, Jeff, it really reminds me a lot of what I and a lot of my friends who I've kind of collected over the last 2 years are talking about all the time, is really getting back to nature and really looking at the human relationship to nature, and how there's so much fear born of the disconnect between nature and ourselves, that if we might start to see ourselves as humans as just part of nature, then it becomes very natural that, like, a flower, you plant it and it blooms and it grows and then it dies and it just starts over again, and that we humans somehow think we're different than that is where a lot of the dissonance is. And I think that's been a really core conversation that I've been having with people.
I don't know if we've hit that specifically in many of our chats, like in that tangible sentence, really. But there is something to, I'm gonna just go with modern day. Like, we've become civilized in cities and houses and things, and like our relationship to life cycles and nature and whatnot, is not always on the same wavelength, just because it's like one of the things where, like, we've talked about how death feels so scary to people a lot of the time, or it's like such a like an imminent big deal, but it's just like in the sense of like life cycles, like, well, no, we're all dying right now, it's happening slowly, it's just happening a lot slower than in some cases, but like we're all dying, which sounds really like morbid and sad, but it's just a fact.
Just real.
But yeah, but it
Mhm.
feels so much more like ominous because of that. Like nobody knows where their food comes from. Like
Mhm.
the number of times I've been like, wait, that's what that plant's like
Like,
tree
that's what
looks
it looks
like?
like? Yeah.
I did not know that. And it's like, ooh, that's not ideal. But there's so much of that, that that makes a lot of sense. But it's how do we get more okay with that?
Well, what's interesting is there's a commodification of staying the same. And I think of that, for example, with like the store Forever 21. Just
I
like the
worked there in high
idea.
school.
Wait, what?
I worked there in high school briefly.
I had an aunt who shopped there. She was
But
not
think about
21.
just the term Forever 21. It's this desire that, like, that's the age you really want to be at, and you always want to be there for the rest of your life. Whether you're young and you want to be 21 or you're older and you want to be 21. Like, and we're constantly trying, even if you think about it with like our digital media or like photos, we're constantly trying to capture and freeze moments. And and I'm saying that in the collective are looking for like age defying things so that we can remain immortal, which is just then beyond. And even like what is it, billionaires that think of legacy and are like, well, I'm going to be immortal in some way long after I'm going to go, and people are still going to remember me. So it's such an insecure approach to life, because we are constantly trying to hold on to water, frankly, as it's just like slipping through our hands. But we keep saying like, we can do it, I can figure it out, instead of just owning like, this is where we're at.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times in the last couple of months in particular that I'm like, aging is a privilege. Like, not everybody gets the opportunity to turn old, and I totally get it. Like, when you just wake up and you've thrown your back out and you're like, I don't love this.
Yep.
Like, I get the frustrations that come with it, but just the amount of people worried about wrinkles and Botox and dyeing their hair, and I'm like, in service of what? Just not looking like you are now? Like, denial, I guess, is a commodity. Ugh.
I mean, I feel like in some of these chats, I think I have probably referenced and if I haven't, I'll briefly say it again. But like, my dad had a phrase that he would say a lot that was, "It is what it is," but it was never like a give up mentality. It was more like a can't change it. So now, like, what are we gonna do now? And that's, I feel like there's something to all of this about like the presence of it, right? Like, just can we just like be wherever you are in time and space and whatever? Because like that phrase is like the, okay, you can't change the past, but also it's like, yeah, you can plan for the future, but like you also have no idea like what that is going to look like. And even if you do plan, like in the sense of current human lives of like, we don't know what technology will look like in 10 years. So like you can plan, but like it's not going to be exactly the thing. So like I feel like a lot of it is kind of about presence, because if we are even going to I mean, there's, within reason planning and not or whatever. But if it is a thing of experiencing death of a family or friend or a pet, like, okay, you can't go back. Like, you do have those memories, which are great, but you can't go back. You can't change anything. And like, if it's happening or has happened, like I feel like where a lot of people dwell is like oh, well, I'll never get to do this, or this won't happen anymore, which is true and valid feelings, but also it's like trying to enjoy the moments that you do have without like worrying too much in either direction. Like you can appreciate it without like worrying too much about it. And I know that that's seems like such a simple thing, but like it's not simple, but it's like very simple words.
Well, it's simple but not easy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because then I think of when, like, if someone was just like, oh, I'll never get to go to prom again, and be like, ugh, why would I ever want to go back there? Like, there's certain ages where you're like, I don't ever want to be there again, right?
Yeah.
And then, and also then when you talk to someone that's like in their 20s, they're like freaked out. And maybe I refer to this as Filipino auntie syndrome. But Filipino auntie syndrome, or at least I just came up with this term literally right now, is you go to a barbecue or whatever gathering, and they go, oh, you're so skinny. Why are you so skinny? So then they give you all this food. And then the next time you come back, then they're like, why are you so fat? You're so fat. You know, so there's never a moment, there's never a time that auntie's ever going to be like, you're perfect.
Yeah, you're enough.
You're enough. You're enough. You're perfect. So that and that's constantly how everyone feels at whatever age they're at, right? When you're a kid, you want to be taller so you can see above the counter, so you can see what's going on. And then when you're a teenager, you wish you were 21 because then you could get high and drink and stuff like that. And then you get 21 and you're like, maybe I'll have more power if I'm this, or maybe I want to be younger. Like, it's just a never ending cycle that when you do find someone that is actually happy in their age, whatever that is, don't you feel like saying like, oh my gosh, I want to be like that person when I'm that age?
Like,
yes.
Whatever age that might, like you could meet that person and they're like 30 or 40 or 65 or 82, like at any age, and just like, oh man, like they're just like doing it and they're fine.
Doing it.
It's like that's
I
so
love
great.
when I meet like an 89-year-old that's just a badass, and I'm like, and they're just doing whatever they want to do, and I'm like, man, that seems awesome.
You're like, yes, please. Yeah, I think there's a lot that came up for me when you were both talking. It did make me think a lot about Jeff, your point earlier, your friend who has a friend, I assume, who's dying, like, but just having anyone you know with a terminal illness, of which I know several, and I had the chance to participate in a young adult cancer survivor retreat at the beginning of March. And that was really beautiful because it really reinforced for me how, you know, when you're given any kind of diagnosis or you're in an accident, like anyone that would maybe choose the word survivor as part of their lived experience, in any capacity, I think there's an element of, well, the veil has been lifted, and I've talked about that a lot, but I think that there's sort of an unfair burden on the people who have then said, okay, so I'll get more specific. Let's say I have a friend who has stage 4 cancer. They're in their late 30s and the treatments are going sort of well, but things kind of keep coming back and sort of don't. And they're very acutely aware of, oh, my birthday just passed, limited birthdays. And I'm like, but that's such a burden, because it's like other people want to spend their birthday with them because it's their birthday. But then I'm like, but we all have limited birthdays. Like we don't know how many. And it just feels sort of unfair that the people who see it, and the people who don't have to carry, like, ignorance is bliss, kind of. But it's not bliss, because that's where all of the fear and dissonance lives.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've been really thinking about the relationship of that a lot, where it's like, oh yeah, like I do think my friend will die a lot sooner than any of us would like them to die. And that's kind of just the reality of it. Like, there's not a lot I can do about that. And the simple idea of knowing that changes the relationship to
Ah.
everything, basically.
So do you feel the person that is suffering from the terminal illness now has to take on the burden of everybody else trying to spend time with them as if their time is running out?
Yeah, and manage all of their own, everyone else's feelings. I
Feelings.
mean,
Mhm.
it happens
Ooh,
even if you get like your appendix out and people get weird about it. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay,
yeah.
that's you. Stop projecting all this on
Yeah.
me. Because if we could all just talk about it, I think it would all be lighter for everybody, minus the sadness, which is just a thing that
This
happens.
is
It's okay.
another emotion.
Yeah.
In a tangential way, this reminds me a lot of, so I've been doing some more diversity inclusion work lately. Um, and it reminds me of inclusion in that it's just like when people try to be inclusive, it becomes very burdensome to the people who are they're trying to include, but it's like there's more work for them, or they're like, I don't want this, but you want this for me, so now you're making me do this thing. And it's like the same idea of like, oh, like how can I help you, or like what, like I want to be able to treasure these moments, but they're like, I just want to like sleep for a while, like can I just not? And that's such a hard thing because like that's like the ex I don't know if it's extra hard, but when it's like the known limited time of one person, it's is that, I don't want to say better or worse, but it's like how when someone passes, the like they, not that they don't matter, but like their feelings are not a thing, and it's the everyone else's feelings for that person. But it's when it's in that stage just before where they're still here, and it's like kind they should be able to do what they want, but it's like all about everyone else's feelings, but you're
Mhm.
there to have to experience that. And maybe I don't want to say have to, because like there's good to that and also a lot to that. um but that feels way harder for everybody, maybe less hard for the others at that time.
But it also, and it's kind of weird that I'm saying it this way, but it's also so me focused, meaning like not the person that's not the terminally ill person that's dying, but everyone else around them's like, what about me? We got to do your bucket list for me
Like it's
so that
kind of
I
for
feel
you.
bad. I
Mhm.
feel okay when you pass away. And when you think of it in the more collective we, and I'm referencing Dark Chronicles, Amber Spyglass, great book. Dark Materials, I mean, sorry. Um, in this book, Amber Spyglass, where this person is about to pass away, they don't pass away. They actually just break up into like these beautiful sparkles and then enter back into like the source, or they enter something that's much more amorphous, but adding to other ancestors, right? And it feels more like, oh, they're not going away. They're just changing their form. They're still going to be around, and you still can conjure up them, not specifically them, but the memory of them is also there with you. And maybe even a part of them. Um, I feel like when we embrace it that way, it's much easier than to let someone go. But instead, we're so fixated on the physical that, we'll even like hold on. I've watched people like hold on to like coffins because they don't want them to go down.
It feels very binary, like you're
Yeah.
here and then you're not here,
Which is not it. I just don't believe that.
which is like I get to in within some level of that relationship and interaction, but it's like the whole like legacy is such a heavy word in my opinion, but it's just like, yeah, it's like, but yeah, there's the memories and like the people that they impacted and their family and their friends who like know them and can speak about them or whatever. But it like death feels like such a like, nope, it's happening, it happened, it's done. And then there's no, there isn't the cycle, or there's no closure in current American practices, at least.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ritual plays such a big part of the whole experience. I mean, it makes me think of the movie Coco and any, the Book
Yep.
of Life. This like sort of reverence for and very intentional holding of ancestors and lineage and people who've died, that I think a big part of it, well, okay, I have like 12 different roads to go on. The first one that I was thinking is about how it's so interesting to see sort of the difference between everybody having a different idea of whether they're a body and a spirit or some kind of energy, or your body and yourself is one thing, like, and everyone just there's such a big spectrum of that. And I do think a little bit, I mean, a lot of that is religious beliefs, I think, that people have been passed down. But I think in my own experience, I never had much exposure to death, particularly as a kid. My grandparents died when I was in college and beyond. And I really feel like that didn't give me the chance to understand death in any capacity. I knew if I went to a wake with my parents, I was going to stand outside. Like, I was told to stand outside. And I think having that lack of, oh yeah, there's a body, but somehow their personality doesn't exist there anymore. Like, just that very visceral kind of, I see them and they don't exist in the capacity that I remember them existing. And that circles back to rituals, because there's this sense of like, when my mother-in-law died, she was in Chicago and we were in LA, and it's just like, one day we could call her on the phone and the next day we couldn't call her on the phone. And there was like nothing to kind of ground us in the like real knowing that she died. Of course we knew she did, and we got her cremains, like there's evidence everywhere, but it doesn't like sink into your nervous system. And I think that's the role that ritual plays, that it feels familiar to you, that you know what to do when someone dies, not because you're going through the motions and not because you're trying to take away anything from them and their individuality, but instead to just say like, yes, we know this, we've seen this before as humans, and we have a way to kind of like settle in that. I don't know. So I feel like the ritual and the nature and the thing, it's like all just very much intertwined.
I mean, we've talked about this before, that I feel certain cultures do it better of like actually celebrating, or at least being more okay when I think of like Filipinos and how, that coffin of that person is there for like a week, sometimes for like a few weeks. So you actually get comfortable with it, just that body just being there, and you're not as scared of it. Was it? But I do feel, especially in the US, we do a horrible job of not celebrating people enough. Horrible job of not celebrating people enough during when they're alive, but then also even at the funerals. Funerals are always sad. And it's just like, no, funerals are every emotion, or every emotion should be available. But we, especially in America, have seen death in such a negative light that we're like, oh, it's so sad that person died when they died, instead of really being like, well, let's identify what he or she, or they did during that time and the impact that they had. And then we could hear each other's stories and then bond on that, rather than just go through the ritual of like, all right, we're going to do the service, we're going to have the communion, we'll eat, and then everyone's out. All right, let's go. It's so commodified and so much like a fast food chain.
Something that popped into my head while both of you were talking just now was have you all seen the movie My Girl, with
Oh,
Macaulay Culkin, but like little and like a girl, like
Mhm.
their childhood friends. They're I don't even know how old they would be in the movie.
they would be like 10. They
7,
were like,
8, 9,
yeah.
like oh, like young kids, but not like little. Like they're like, oh, we're gonna go ride our bikes by ourselves and come back. But in that movie, like they're best friends, and uh, something happened. Something happened where like she lost a favorite ring of hers or something, and then so he like went into the forest to go look for it. But then something happened with like a bee's nest, and he got stung, but he was like allergic, and then he like passed away. And they're kids, but like the funeral is happening, and they're like in the house, but she's like sitting on the stairs or in some room or whatever, and like a service is happening, and she's like quietly just like walks up to the casket, and it's open, and she sees him, and he's like, laying there, and then whatever outfit they put him in and stuff like that, and she can't let go of the fact that he's not wearing his glasses, and she like he can't see without his glasses, like where are his glasses, and it's like kind of reminds me of this thing too of like it's not a cycle thing, and we still have this weird thing of like, okay, I'm gonna dye my hair and I don't want to get old, and then we even in like funeral times, it's like we get all pretty for whoever, like is it like I like what outfit and like the makeup and like make sure they look all nice, but it's just like it doesn't feel like real or natural or
The amount of
those
times
things.
I've at least seen it at least 2 or 3 times, once with my dad and then with somebody else, but like they were angry when they saw the
For the
person in the
person.
casket because they were
Mm.
like, they don't look anything like they actually do, which also makes sense because like their soul has left them. So I don't even feel sometime when I saw my dad, I was like, that's not him. I don't know who that is. Right. Because his soul is left. But in addition to that, all the stuff that they do to the person makes them look like Ripley's Believe It or Not. And then you're like, who is that? I've seen people angry, like furious about it.
Yeah,
A whole different
it's
level of like traumatic.
Yeah.
totally because they kind of, I feel like when someone dies, their body gets whisked away as soon as possible in the US anyway.
Mhm.
And then when you're presented them again, if you're the family, you get like a private visitation time. And it's like, what a weird thing. Like 24 hours ago, we had dinner
Yep.
with them. Or,
Yep.
like just the disconnect is so weird. And it is weird that like there's a particular outfit that you'd want to wear. And I'm like,
Like,
I
who
don't get
chose
it.
this?
Like,
Like, why is this
a
happening?
lot of people will designate an outfit that they want to be buried in, or something that mattered to them, or something they really loved. And I'm like, wow, that calls up a lot of questions for myself of like, well, number one, I would love a green burial. Wrap me in a piece of linen and just dump me in the ground. But wow, what a it comes back to the kind of like me centric where you really
Yep.
have to unpack so much about your own beliefs and your own conditioning. I mean, to your point, Lauren, about like diversity and inclusion, it feels like the same kind of excavating of like conditioning where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I am just acting out of whatever discomfort or whatever conditioning, or it really, I am making it about me. And I think the
Yeah.
quintessential point of that I see so much is when someone dies, everyone asks how. And the how has absolutely nothing to do with the person that died.
Yep.
It's only for the surviving people. And I do it all the time. A friend of a friend died unexpectedly. And the first thing I wanted to know was what happened.
Yeah.
Why do we ask how?
so that we can prepare ourselves to understand whether or not we would do the same thing that they did,
Mm.
or how can we not be in that situation. It's a
How
way to
can
just
we
be like,
avoid
oh, I wouldn't, that's not going to happen to me,
that?
even though
Oh, they died by rock climbing? Well, that's why I don't rock climb. So
totally got to keep us comfortable, because then we don't have to be as upset about it, even though we should just be upset about it.
it's also go back for just a moment to like, what am I wearing? Or
Mhm.
what casket do I want? Or all these things, if you think about it, are so absurd and so focused on the wrong things at the end of someone's life. But I don't want to say wrong, but it's like, there's so many other more important things that you'd want to
But
explore.
some
But
people deeply believe that they need their body later, that they will be in the future, they will be reincarnated in their body when Jesus comes back. I don't know. It's a religious thing.
Not as
I did not realize that's why people got buried, was because they needed their body for later. But people really deeply believe that well, they have to be intact in some capacity so that when God comes back, they will raise them from the dead and they will be
oh,
whole.
oh.
And so it's so interesting though, because it feels, what I hear, Jeff, when you're saying wrong, what I hear is sort of like, it feels like it's missing an acknowledgement of their life on earth as it is right
Yes.
now. Like it's missing now.
It's so disconnected from humanity.
Mhm.
It's so disconnected from who we are as human beings and how we actually connect. And instead it sounds like we're like moving deck chairs on the Titanic type thing. Like, oh, this person needs more rouge. Really? That's what we're going to focus on?
You're
really?
like, they're dead, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, they don't need
You
to
know,
look
they don't
more
care.
alive.
I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, it's not really going to matter. Yeah.
Yeah, I really think that comes back to fear also, that we couldn't possibly go to a funeral and see a dead body as a dead body without any makeup, without any softening. I feel like all of those measures are to make it easier, more palatable, in air quotes, for the family. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but my grandma died. Like, that's sad no matter how you
Mhm.
figured this out. So all of it just feels pointless, because it's like, well, I'm just gonna be sad. It doesn't make me less sad because she's wearing her favorite dress.
Interesting.
I also wonder, because I have not unpacked this, but like like what happened or how, that question, it
Mhm.
feels, I mean, it is kind of like the knee-jerk reaction. It's just like, oh, how are you? I'm fine. It's like somebody passed away and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like
Mhm.
that's like the response oftentimes. um I mean, assuming you knew the person to some degree. And I wonder, because like depending on your, this feels so structured and I apologize, but like depending on your proximity of closeness to the person, right? Like if it's like your close family or extended family, or like a friend of a friend that you like met once but you know them but not that well, but like depending on how close, like if it's family that you cared about, I assume like it is the, like you're going to be sad no matter what and have a lot of feelings. But if it's the further you get away, is that question, like not just preparing that like whoever for justifying their own lives, but also, I mean, I guess it's their own lives of like, maybe I don't go rock climbing. But is it also then potentially like bracing themselves of like, how sad should I be? Like, not in a you should be
Mhm.
sad or not, but kind of like, oh my gosh, was it like a freak
Like,
accident?
what
Or
level of
like,
tragic was it?
yeah, to be
Mm.
like how upset or how cautious should I be in my words to you?
Mhm.
It's like that level of understanding, but I don't think it's like I'm trying to understand that implicitly. Uh, but yeah,
Yeah.
There's some level of that.
Yeah. I mean, I even was discussing this with someone and I was like, well, on some level, I want to know how so that the next time I see them, I don't strike up a big conversation about
That's like related.
whatever it is, like in kind of reverence to the other person. And I'm like, wouldn't it be so wonderful if our society could just handle big emotions and allow people to have big emotions so that I don't have to dance around and pretend like I'm not going to trigger someone? Like, when my mother-in-law died, it's like, I'm not going to Brian didn't forget that his mom died. Like, I'm not going to remind him. It's kind of like when I got diagnosed with cancer and people don't want to talk about it. I'm like, dude, I didn't forget that I have cancer. If you say cancer to me, it's not going to be like, oh shit, I have cancer. Like, it's just not a thing. And I think it's a similar space in the death world, the how of like, can we just have big emotions? Yeah.
Yeah, if you think about it, if someone cries uncontrollably at a funeral, that's okay. But if they do that same thing at the grocery, thinking about somebody that they spend a lot of time with at that grocery,
Oh,
all of a sudden you're looked down upon, like, are you okay? What's wrong with you?
Hmm. And everyone wants to scoot you out the door
Everyone
and
wants to
make sure
scoot you
that
out the
you're
door, right? I mean,
yeah.
they do that with kids when kids are like crying themselves, right? It's like, oh, so annoying. Emotions, oh, the worst. We're always trying to just
Disruption.
sterilize everything in the US. It's so ridiculous.
Well, they being past people of America, I feel like we're fed or just perpetuating the idea that like they were shielding us all from something. And I'm like, I don't know about everybody, but I don't feel like I was shielded from that much. I mean, my parents did a good job of keeping me as like, I was sort of sheltered in a lot of ways, but I'm like, was that helpful? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm gonna go with no, but maybe. But
rhetorical, but also
but I
no.
didn't have, there's a but just
So,
having more space to be human. Yeah.
so a question that I have specifically for you, Julia,
Mm.
is so what have you learned so far as you explore being a death doula
Mhm.
that has like taught you to, I don't know, understand the transition of death from like, as the person is in their final days
Mhm.
or final months or whatever.
Well, there's 1,001 things per usual, but I do think that a big part of this exploration and what's come up a lot recently, besides like in addition to this kind of getting back to nature and just being more straightforward about what happened, I think the kind of a really great entry point for people is noticing when you do and don't use the words death, dying, died, all of
Mm.
the other, instead of the various euphemisms like lost, past, move on, like, and in what context you're using those. And I think in the death care world, it's very much like use the words death and dying. That's exactly what's happening. You don't have to sugarcoat it because it's just like when a baby is born and they're healthy and strong and everything went well with the birth, and then you're like, they were born. It's not like they moved on. Like, there's this kind of incongruency there that keeps death and dying from being less tangible. And again, with the shielding, a lot of the times when any one of us uses I lost my whatever, they're very vocal people in the death care world. They're like, you didn't fucking lose them. You didn't walk out on the street with them and then you walked another way and you've lost them. Like, that's not what happened. They died. They went through the process of dying, which in the past tense is died. Like, I feel like that's a really interesting kind of entry point to thinking about your own relationship and how, the contexts around you are really, really setting the stage for you in a way that like you kind of get to call the shots a little more than you thought. Like if you want to use the word death and dying, great. And if you don't want to, if you, as long as you do it with intention, that's all I ask of you, basically. Yeah. So that's just one piece, but I think that's a really interesting place to start.
I just want to appreciate y'all being willing to talk about death generally. We've done this many times, but I feel like it kind of like Julia, what you just said about like it's just what's happening, and like having words to talk about it. Like we've been like sort of trained to talk about like people, we've lost people or whatever, but like that's true in the context, but like in facts, like this is literally what's happening, and just being able to talk about things without people panicking is such a lovely thing to be able to do, regardless of topic, because it makes things less scary and makes things more like open um, to learning and understanding and all that stuff. So like I've always appreciated all of these for that reason, and beyond, like also y'all are very intelligent, thoughtful people, and I enjoy that as well. But yeah, just the willingness to be like, yeah, you want to talk about death? I'm like, okay. Like I don't know what that's gonna look like because nobody does it. But yeah, language is super helpful for context.
I feel like there's so many taboo subjects because people don't want to handle hard emotions,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
And a majority of the time, then I don't know. I'm on this Coachella kick. I mentioned this earlier to Lauren. You know, Coachella now is not a music festival; it's a content creating festival because people go there to let other people know that they went there, and it's not even about being there. It's not even about being. There's no being, right? There's
Yeah.
just like, look who I am. And you can see that same level of superficiality as we get towards death when you look at a funeral and the things that we actually focus on, whether it's how nice the casket is or how nice the tombstone is. And, you know, we talk around things instead of just being like, I'm really sad right now. This is super sad and I'm still sad. I'm sad 5 years later, you know, or whatever. But we don't feel we have like, I don't know, a space to talk about it. I mean, I still feel there's a certain level of cognitive dissonance for what has happened in the last 2 years, because like 1 million people died. And all of a sudden now it's like, no big deal. Now no masks is optional. And it's just like 1 million people died and potentially other people. Like, we haven't mourned it. We haven't learned how to have more shared humanity for other people because of it. It's just, I just find it just, yeah, that there's like this, there's this gap in our like collective soul that we have not addressed.
Yeah, I mean, the compartmentalization is so real. People, the denial and compartmentalization of reality to whatever reality really means, but like there's certain things that are sort of factual that we can't totally debate. And I'm like, oh my God, guys, it is actually easier in the long run for us to have emotions and work through those emotions, especially when the whole world can be in it together. Like, what a beautiful thing to come out of such a heart-wrenching, stressful, horrible time. But like, also look at the we of it all. Like, what a beautiful thing that we could all support each other. And instead, there's so many people that are just like, okay, well, that's done now because I never want to think about it and I never stop to process it anyway. So just going to shove that away in my back of my brain and let's go to Vegas. You know, like,
right.
It's like, okay. I mean,
This is like this is a topic that I don't think we can dive into now, but it also
Mhm.
reminds me of like we've been, I think, most of the time focusing a lot on the human life cycle of
Mm,
death, but like death of time and space and things and phases and eras and whatever is a very real thing. And I feel like it kind of just dawned on me because Julie, you brought this up too, where it's just like birth and like dating and new jobs, but we don't talk about like terminations or death or like breakups. Like, how do you manage any of that? Like, it happens, and then people have emotions, and people don't know how to handle them, and it's kind of just trash. And we're just like, we don't want to talk about anything ending, apparently, ever.
mhm.
And think about it, the association of a breakup or the association of a divorce or all are negative when it's just like that might have been the most healthiest thing for them to do, right?
Yes.
If anything, we should celebrate sometimes divorce. We should celebrate, oh, you finally left that person because you feel you deserve more. That's amazing. You left that job that's been exploiting you. That's amazing. Like, why are we
Mhm.
not celebrating the end of things? We love celebrating the beginning of things. We do not like celebrating the end
It's
of
new and shiny, and then it's like
Commencement.
confusing because
It's
nobody knows how to
confusing.
deal with it
Yes.
because we
I
don't
feel like
practice.
this is our topic for the next losses, like because grief endings, micro losses, whatever you that
Mhm.
whole realm. Yeah. It's
that honestly,
so important.
all of the other practice isn't ending things might help us with like life version as well.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting. The
Because we have
practicing.
zero practice with ending things,
I mean, that's
or
half
very
of
little.
the whole point of meditating. If people don't like to talk about it, but like the practice of yoga is like to practice having a good death in some ways, in some schools of thought. But
I don't
So
know enough
I
about
am
yoga,
going to
apparently.
challenge myself. This is going to be my play experiment until our
Mhm.
next conversation is to celebrate endings.
Mhm.
I'm going to try to celebrate more endings. Like even WDS
Yeah. It's the
It's
end.
ending, right?
ending. So I could be sad during that time, but I don't want to spend all my time being sad. That's an emotion that's important and should be recognized, and I'll feel it. But I want to feel all of the things,
Yeah.
right? I want to feel gratitude that I even get to go to this last one, right?
We should have
Yeah.
a meetup for it.
Ooh.
Oh, a death meetup.
Oh my gosh, a
If we're gonna
funeral.
have a death
Like a-
meetup, then
like a
Lauren's
WDS
gotta
funeral.
come now.
mean.
Lauren's gotta come now.
Oh,
People
I
will show
hear
up
you.
for that. We did say we wanted to one day run a workshop or
Mm.
something. I mean, this would be the place.
We'll chat.
Get it. Get it. Am I getting excited about an ending or a beginning? I don't know.
Both.
It's both.
I mean,
Speaking of
life and death,
endings,
right?
Speaking of ending, we must wrap this up.
this is perfect. But this
So
is
what
just such
are
a delight.
What are your final thoughts, both of you, regarding your takeaways from this conversation?
How dare you present that question to us like this?
Such a big question.
And you must say it.
Honestly, I
Just
just
say it
feel
quickly.
really grateful that you both were like that this even started at all and that it's continued, and just to know you both, and it's just a delight. Yeah, that's my takeaway.
Aw.
I will follow up with that in the in same idea and loosely related to our chats of just like I appreciated what it has been. If it continues, I'm into it because I like it. But if it doesn't, like life happens. Like we haven't met for several months because life happened.
Yeah.
And we've been busy. But I appreciate the presence of this. Like there's the willingness to try, and when we talk, we're all very in it, with not a huge expectation of before or after, but being, and just understanding, which I love.
Maybe that's why I feel I'm more connected to both of you, is because I feel I'm just being when I'm with y'all. So the biggest takeaway I'm going to get, in addition to the celebrating endings, is this collective we. I'm scared of death by myself, but when I talk about it with you all of a sudden I feel we're part of a more collective we, and then it's not scary. I see everyone else around me that has also experienced it, and then I don't feel alone. So thank you for that. Till next time, thank you so much.
Yay.
Thank you.